Hello and welcome to Meet the Author. I'm your host, Ken Marks. Meet the Author is brought to you by the Institute for Global Transformation, or IFGT. IFGT is a nonprofit, all-volunteer organization, and we're devoted to transforming the world individually and collectively. I do want to invite you to please come to our website, ifgt.net. There's just a wealth of resources there on a whole host of subjects dealing under the general umbrella of consciousness and transformation. There's scads of information, and if you'd like to become part of our community and join IFGT, you can click the join button at the top menu. You'll receive there more information on our membership options, some of which are free, and you'll also be able to then complete your form. And if you decide to join as a paid member, there are links there to help take care of that as well. Also, if you would like to support our work, including programs like Meet the Author, there is a donate button at that same top menu, and we invite you to please click that. That'll take you right to PayPal, and you can make a very easy donation to us. Again, we're a nonprofit, so those are tax deductible donations if you're itemizing your donations. So one of the things that we try to do with Meet the Author is make this program a little more unusual than the wealth of programs that are now available to us along these lines in this day and age. But what we try to do is create the opportunity for our live audience to interact directly with our guests each month. And typically we would do that. Sometimes we have to make adjustments, and this month is one such. Our guest is the very distinguished Dr. Ervin Laszlo, and the downside of live programs that invite the world is time zones. And we are very grateful for Dr. Laszlo coming and sharing any of his time with us. I certainly wasn't going to ask to impose on him to be awake at 2 a.m. his time to do this live interview. So if you'll bear with us this month, I recorded the interview with him about 2 weeks ago on July 12th. So I'm going to just give a brief introduction and then share that recording with you, and then we'll come back for some discussion with this audience. But this is actually the third interview that Dr. Laszlo has provided to IFGT. And the previous two, in October of 2020, in that interview, they reviewed some of Dr. Laszlo's illustrious career and discussed his then recently released book, Reconnecting to Source. And then in December of 2020, Henry interviewed Dr. Laszlo again, during which we learned more about this incredibly gifted and prolific thought leader, and discussed another then recent publication, this one entitled How We Can Build a Better World, the World Shift Manual. So as I mentioned, tonight is then the third interview that IFGT has had the privilege of conducting with Dr. Laszlo in this past year. Frankly, this speaks to not only his incredibly proficient writing talents, but also the intelligence and authority he brings to very profound, inspiring, and critically important work and ideas. So if you were to please subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can see the prior two interviews Henry conducted, and shortly after this program is completed in the next couple of weeks, this show will also be on our YouTube channel. And as I watched Henry's interviews and then conducted my own a couple of weeks ago, kind of got the sense that we got our own little mini course with Dr. Laszlo in a small classroom setting. So I would encourage all of you who are interested in his work and want to learn more about him, both his life as well as his work, go to our YouTube channel. You can find it easily. Just search Institute for Global Transformation on the channel. And also just a quick plug, I invite you to subscribe, please. And if you hit the little bell icon next to the subscribe button, you'll get notifications whenever we put new material on the channel. So because these previous interviews exist, and Henry did a very nice job, and he provides a lot more introduction in terms of Dr. Laszlo's background. So I'm going to try to keep that brief tonight, but I will read a short bio and then play the interview from a couple of weeks ago. So the book that I discussed with Dr. Laszlo, and that is the subject tonight, is called The Immutable Laws of the Akashic Field, Universal Truths for a Better Life and a Better World. Ervin Laszlo is a philosopher and systems scientist, twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. He has published more than 101 books and over 400 articles and research papers. The subject of the 1-hour PBS special, Life of a Modern Day Genius, Laszlo is the founder and president of the international think tank, the Club of Budapest, and of the prestigious the Laszlo Institute of New Paradigm Research. The recipient of various honors and awards, including honorary PhDs from the United States, Canada, Finland, and Hungary, Laszlo received the Goy Peace Award, the Japan Peace Prize, in 2001, the C.C. Mandir Peace Prize in 2006, and was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004 and 2005. He is a member of numerous scientific bodies, including the International Academy of Science, the World Academy of Arts and Science, the International Academy of Philosophy of Science, and the International Medici Academy. He was elected member of the Hungarian Academy of Science in 2010. In 2019, Ervin Laszlo was cited as one of the 100 most spiritually influential living people in the world, according to Watkins Mind, Body, Spirit magazine. So with that, hopefully brief introduction, I'm going to go ahead and start the video, and that runs a little over 40 minutes, and then we'll come back for some discussion. And so I just want to welcome you back. Actually, this is the third time that you shared time with the Institute for Global Transformation's book feature that we're now calling Meet the Author. And so I want to welcome you back. And before we get into talking about your book published this past spring called The Immutable Laws of the Akashic Field, Universal Truths for a Better Life and a Better World, I just want to say that my experience with it was actually transformational. I started reading it and found myself being a bit confused and skeptical. And by the end of it, it just resonated fully. And so even just being with this book for a few days was kind of a transformational experience for me. So I appreciate that, and it was very powerful.
That's the purpose of the book, actually, to make a lasting impression, hopefully always for the best.
It certainly did. And it also was, it interested me that last month we interviewed a gentleman named Rabbi Wayne Dosick, who has recently written a book called Radical Loving, and very different perspective, but the messages were remarkably aligned. And so I think that points to some of the other aspects that you point out in the book of how a lot of these things that you're sharing and that science is now beginning to prove experimentally have actually been known to humanity for thousands of years. And we'll hopefully touch on that a little bit more as we get into the interview. One of the first things I wanted to ask you about is, as a scientist, I noticed that this is actually, I believe, the fourth title that you've published with reference to either the Akashic Field or the Akasha. You had Science in the Akashic Field, the Akashic Experience, and The Dawn of the Akashic Age, written between 2004 and 2013. So do you see your work, both in this topic and maybe in general, because it does cross over to many of your other books too, as kind of a scientist where the volumes build upon the findings of the previous work, and or is it kind of also maybe in keeping with one of the immutable laws of this is kind of your work evolving coherently? And if so, then what would you say are the new findings, if you will, of this book?
Well, I am trying to formulate this basic insight in light of more and more evidence coming together, but I'm not building it mechanically or sort of mechanistically, one thing on top of the other. It's all coming together as a conception of the world, as a conception which Plato called the soul or the forms, which are deeper than just the phenomena that we see. the phenomena that we see are like shadows on the wall of the cave, as Plato said.
Right.
But there is something behind us. The light is behind us, which you don't see directly, but we can assume that what we see is a kind of a reflection of that. And then, of course, what in modern science now we are discovering as the universal field, as a quantum field, which constitutes a deeper dimension that the quantum physicist David Bohm called the implicate order, in which everything that we perceive in the world that is a phenomenon that we perceive, ourselves included, is in the explicate order. But behind it, beyond it, is something deeper. Now, the ancients, thousands of years ago, talked about a dimension, which they call the Akasha, which includes all the other dimensions, fire, air, earth, water, and this energy, everything that is in the real world is included in the Akasha, in potential. Everything unfolds out of the Akasha. And according to Vivekananda, the great yogi, he said it also unfolds from the Akasha, it also falls back into the Akasha. And periodically there is a new cycle of the universe. And that's a concept that modern consciousness research and modern physics, quantum physics, would absolutely support. So I'm trying to get this basic insight in a form that where people say, aha, yes, I thought so. I have an experience of this kind. I have suspected this, and this somehow confirms what I intuitively have been believing. And transforming experiences, you call about having a transformation experience, that's what I'm trying to achieve. Because I think the worldview that we have, dominant worldview, is still a Newtonian mechanistic worldview. And it's very, very misleading and very partial, very limiting. It excludes consciousness, for example. And we can't explain our instant interconnections. It's a mechanistic, fractionated, fragmentary worldview. And we have been building our world on that basis, and this world became very inequitable and unsustainable because we are building it on a very partial and unstable foundation. So it's time to rethink who we are, what the world is. And I'm looking as a key concept, this concept that the ancients came up with, the Akasha dimension. What we perceive is always not the whole thing. We perceive a sequence of events that actually constitute a field. It's like we were picking up things from a field. This is how consciousness operates in our lifetime. So the Akashic field is really our experience of the deep dimension of the universe. That's, I would say, in a capsule is what I'm trying to communicate.
Yeah, no, that it really is fascinating, and it's also so I don't know. There's a joy to kind of watching this evolve from your mind and communicating this with us and synthesizing that with the obvious compassion and love that you have for out of being a love, and also just for humanity, and wanting to translate these kind of principles into how we make the world more of a reflection of what is really possible. And I love all the way that kind of fits together across your work. You've touched on some things. I thought maybe what might be helpful, some of our viewers may appreciate if you could just making a distinction between two terms that they might have heard using reference to the Akasha or Akashic. I think a more common term that is all over YouTube, for example, is the Akashic record. And so can you talk to us a little bit about how you would distinguish this Akashic field with the Akashic record?
Well, the Akashic record is a highly spiritual statement, actually probably something that has channeled by spiritual people in all their states of consciousness, which claims that, and it finds that anything that happened once is still, in some sense, still present. Nothing disappears constantly, fully and entirely. And this is not so surprising because now we know, for example, in contemporary physics, that the energy also is like that. You can't create energy, you can't destroy energy, you can transform energy from a usable to a non-usable form, for example, from strong to weak, various forms, electric and magnetic and mechanical and whatnot. But you can't destroy it, nor can you create and destroy information in that cosmic sense in which it exists in the world. It's not just something that we create with our talking and our writing and our brains. Information is something that moves the world, that codes the world. If the world is not completely random, it's because there is information in it that is not random. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes the world coherent. And coherence itself is what Einstein said the most remarkable, amazing things about the universe, that it's coherent. It's not just a random chaos. It has a structure, it has a logic built into it. Everything has this ordering logic, basically. And the more we investigate, more and more we find that. So the Akashic records are one aspect, one of the laws. I enumerated 3 laws in this new book. There could be many others picked up in when you go into deeper down, but 3 very paramount laws. And one of them is connection, then the second one is memory, the third one is coherence in evolution. So this coming together, this memory function is a memory law, is the law of the Akashic records. A record is something that survives, that exists, keeps existing. So I would say, willing to say that openly, as a scientist and a philosopher, nothing that ever happened on space and time disappears entirely. Nothing vanishes. And things can change form, can be perceptible, experienceable, non-experienceable, conscious, unconscious, etc. But nothing disappears. And that means that the Akashic field is a memory field, is a cosmic memory field. Remember that. Whatever you do, whatever you say, whatever you think, leaves a trace. The trace is the record, that's the Akashic record. And of course, there's more to the universe than just a record. That's why we can talk about the Akashic field and its laws, of which one of the laws is what I would call the memory law. But there are also major other laws, and those are just as important.
And people are simply going to have to read the book to really understand what these 3 laws are. And I appreciate the summary, because certainly that was one of my questions. And one of the other kind of major elements of this book and others you've written is then that you invite other authors to contribute and kind of help to demonstrate how the principles and the ideas and the science that you share actually are showing up or reflecting in other parts of life. So, for example, with regard to the idea that everything that ever happens and that we ever do is in a universal memory in some form, for instance, can be demonstrated through the life review aspects of near-death experience, experiencers. And there are other elements where memories might be brought forward that we had no recollection of, even in conscious states. Just somehow, we get a memory triggered that if we were asked, say, do you recall when you did X, we might not be able to do that, but in some other form, we can tap into that memory. And so I think that's just an example of how these things are not just wonderful imaginations of a brilliant mind that you possess, but they actually do translate into things that are perhaps tangible, but certainly more relatable on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. Now there's evidence in the work of consciousness researchers, psychiatrists, psychologists, that under altered states of consciousness, which when you're in a deeper state, when you can go deeper down and not just be occupied with the surface of events that are happening, but going down to your own psyche, to your own consciousness, then in these states, anything and everything that you ever happened to you can be recalled. It's in this, you can do it through hypnosis, you can do it through suggestion, you can do it through self-analysis and self development, also developing your consciousness, your deeper self. But it's not somebody inventing it for you. You, each of us, can come up with anything that happened to us. Sooner or later, we can, by association with other things, by allowing ourselves to dream, to think, to have our intuition come to the fore. But nothing is completely lost. And that is the main element, I think, of the Akashic Field.
Well, so that's interesting. You think that's the main, because I found all three of the laws incredibly compelling.
Well, I'm correct myself. You're right. One of the main elements.
Okay. All right, because the other being just the absolute interconnectedness of every single element of the universe, which I think when you're new to this thinking, at times it may be confusing to think of being connected with the other 7.7 billion humans on the planet. But in fact, as you demonstrate through this book, our interconnectedness is, and much of this is much easier to absorb once we let go of our kind of conditioned constructs. And so it's not connectedness necessarily in the way that we would think of it in a Western encultured way, but much deeper, much more fundamental.
And this shouldn't surprise us anymore that the universal field, this Akashic field, can contain all these experiences and keep it ready for us to recall. We now know that information can be stored incredibly densely through the holograms. For example, you get steady state holograms, the size of a cube of sugar, they say, one example. If a cube of sugar can conserve and manifest all the information that's relative to every letter of every volume in the Library of Congress. So it's mind-boggling. Anything that happened anywhere in the universe can, in principle, is conserved and is retrievable. Of course, what interests us most is to retrieve some of our own experiences, what happened to us. And this is why it's the practical value of this interconnectedness. The fact that we can meet again, whatever we have been doing, we can review it, we can move further. And people in deep states, altered states of consciousness, they can do that. They do it. Psychiatrists like Stanislav Grof, for example, said that people in altered states of consciousness are connected to just about everything, whether it's human or non-human. Even mythical beings, whatever can be imagined, is also retrievable, connectable.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. And I think one of the, for me, one of the more perhaps enthralling parts of the book was Christopher Baki's Beish, thank you, sharing of his personal research as an academic with LSD, and just amazing accounts of his experiences as he just got deeper and deeper into his travels through the universe, frankly. Just amazing.
It is being shown the universe as it were in these deep experiences. It's one of these experiences. And it's really amazing. But anything that happened is conceivably there, still there, and conceivably re-experienceable. So one of the ways of doing it is to enter an altered state of consciousness, and LSD is one approach to achieve that altered state. Meditation, prayer, deep aesthetic experience, self-analysis or absolute calmness and experience of nature. There are other avenues, right, physiologically, physically saner and sounder than taking drugs. But Beish experimented with and explored that avenue, and that is valuable in itself to know that it is possible. But let's try to do it by our own means, by our soft means that doesn't destroy or harm the fabric of our brain and of our nervous system.
Yeah. So I want to address a couple of points, and part of what I'm trying to do with this program through the IFGT is relate our work with the work of the authors that we're interviewing and getting to know. And so I want to tie that to the third law a bit, which is this evolution toward coherence, but relate that to your thoughts on human behavior. And as I've thought about this question, I wondered, do you see human behavior, because there's references in the book to then what we need to do to try to effect movement toward what you refer to in your work with the Dalai Lama as planetary consciousness, and there are others who wrote essays in the book about what we need to do to help kind of move us toward this more evolved world, of a better world and a better life. And so, do you see our behavior though as a matter of kind of free will and initiation? Are we part of a system of evolving coherently? And then the last part of my question is, or am I asking the wrong question? Because as is also pointed out in the book, things are not either or, they're and. So how do you see human behavior fitting in with everything kind of we've discussed?
Well, human behavior follows from human thinking. What we believe about the world influences how we behave in the world. And this thinking about the world is a question of our mind, our consciousness itself not being static, always the same, but evolving. A healthy consciousness matures, ripens, becomes deeper, becomes more embracing, and more interconnected. What we see from the study of people whom we esteem are deeply spiritual people or mature individuals, they all have some traits in common. Some of these traits mean that they embrace all things around them. They don't exclude things. They don't feel animosity. They don't fight others. They try to understand. And ultimate expression of this is what young people today and any deep thinking people today call love. Unconditional love, not love because I want to gain some advantage, but because I feel love as being part of me. And if I feel the world as belonging to me, and I can love the world outside as I love myself, because the world is part of me, just as I'm part of the world. And these are all traits of an evolving consciousness, and they influence our behavior. I think these wise people not necessarily always and necessarily behave wisely. It's also possible for them to make mistakes and to be foolish. Then they're not so wise in that particular point of view. But the fact is that when you mature, wisdom does appear, and this wisdom shows increasing coherence in your thinking. You tie things together. You don't have so many loose ends. Things are not so separate. We recall Einstein saying, who said separateness is an illusion. Is prompting by our seeing this world as consisting of objects and people and events. But underneath it all, it's all connected. There are beautiful sayings about this connection. William James said, we are like islands in the sea, separate on the surface, but connected in the deep. Right. They're also like trees in a forest, they're separate trees, but their roots can intertwine and join together underneath. So basically this deep dimension, the Akasha dimension, is one of interconnection and one which gives rise to a feeling, to an attitude that we can best describe as seeking oneness, seeking coherence, and expressing it as love in and for things themselves. That is the ripening, that is a maturing consciousness and mind. And we need desperately and urgently such a mindset to emerge in our world so that we don't just fight each other and destroy the world and our world in the process, but begin to see ourselves as part of a larger whole and try to maintain that whole in a good, safe and sound condition. So we need a real maturing of human intelligence after this tremendously heady ride with new technologies, more and more power, more and more energy, more and more information, greater and greater distances, where we could see that we could almost do anything. That was a kind of a cowboy mentality. When you're out there in the Wild West, then you can just lasso anything that you can get. Now it's time to reflect and to know that we have to create a community. We have to create a coherent working system in this planet. That is the big mission before us.
So I thank you for that. And I think you've kind of answered, but I will probe a little more on this line that we are capable of everything you described as our minds, our intellects, and our consciousness evolve. But I hear you also saying that evolution doesn't simply just manifest on its own, that we also need to participate through practice, through study, through actions that we take deliberately, and that perhaps those two things are another example of interconnectedness, that as we do those things, for instance, as one practices meditation consistently, you evolve your practice and as a conscious being, that in ways that you wouldn't if you were not deliberate in that. And as a musician, I'm sure you also know that, well, although you were a prodigy, and we'll touch on that in a moment too, but practice and deliberate choice and selectiveness in how you spend your time, energy, and focus are part of this, as well as what I'm interpreting from your comments and your work. Is that correct?
Well, we have to act in the world. We are wholes when we consider our own body, our own self. We are a whole system. But we're also parts relating to the world outside, which are larger wholes, communities, ecologies, the whole sphere of life or web of life on the planet. These are all life wholes in which we participate. When we mature, we not only sort of mature in regard to our own self, we also mature as a participant, as an essential part of the world around us. So we need to do that consciously. The really truly wise person doesn't just sit in a corner and look at his navel and meditate and just remove himself or herself from the world. We have to be immersed in the world and be part of this system, this wave of evolution, which is toward coherence, toward oneness, and which is fueled by the sense of belonging and ultimately by a sense of love. So yes, I mean, we have to mature on all levels, on the inner and on the outer.
And that maturation, again, is not a passive happening. It is something that we are actors and have to take part in effecting that or making that element of coherent evolution.
Well, it helps if you know. It helps if you know what you're about. Right. Because just hitting on it by chance is taking a big chance.
Right.
It's good to know that the universe, as far as now we know from the new cosmology, the new physics, the new biology, operates as a coherent system, despite of the chaos, despite of the randomness that also appears here and there. On the whole, there is a movement toward coherence in the universe, complexity and coherence. And it's good to know that so that we can seek it ourselves. We can seek the purpose of our life. My recent work has been focused on that. My autobiography is subtitled A Life in Quest of the Purpose of Life. Yeah. That is the subtitle. And I think that it's important to know, whether you know it through science, know it through meditation, through social experience, practice, many ways that you can know this, but know that we need to evolve into a larger unity, into a greater coherence with the world. Otherwise, this fragmented and unstable world can take us down,
Yes,
can create butterfly effects that are becoming very heavy effects, things
yes,
that will be very difficult then to mediate and to bring back to normal. We have to stay put on the right way, on the right side of nature, not separate ourselves off and try to dominate it, but be part of the dynamic that is expressed in nature. Nature also expresses something. I'm convinced of that. It has a purpose. All life has a purpose. Nothing appeared in this universe purely by chance. That is one of the great insights that's emerging now. I'm describing it in this book also.
yes,
A random universe could not have produced this kind of phenomena that we meet now in the universe. Ourselves, other forms of life, galaxies, planets, not even molecules. There's some calculation that show that to produce the DNA of a fruit fly by random moves would take, by any reasonable estimates, would take longer than the age of the universe.
yeah.
Purely randomness doesn't explain what we find, you know.
Yeah, I love
And
the citation from Fred Hoyle and
that's
the,
right.
the business of, greater probability that a hurricane could assemble the random parts of an airplane
By
than,
blowing to a scrapyard. Yes.
right, right. Yeah. I want to respect your time, and I also want to respect those of our members who submitted questions. So I want to make sure I get to those. And so,
Let's find that.
one of our members, Peggy, was quite taken with your musical talents and that part of your life history. And her question is, do you attribute your prodigious piano performance as a youngster to a former life? This kind of gets to the memory law.
Well, I suspect so. I suspect so. But it would take a lot of psychiatric exploration to go a little bit deeper into it. I've always hesitated to actually ask that question and dig deeper into my experience, because music as a performer, as an interpreter, is a very spontaneous thing. Too much intellectualization, can freeze it, allow it to unfold. But yes, the answer is I suspect that there may have been something in my past lives, because I think we all have multiple lives behind us. Something that was carried over, which was a recognition already at the age of 5, recognition that music is something that is very familiar to me. Pieces of music already at that age were so familiar that I could, if my mother, who was a piano teacher, started playing a piece, very often I could almost continue it. I find it, yes, this is this is how it is, So I didn't really learn anything new. I discovered things, and that I think is the key to a renewed past life experience, that you rediscovered who you were in the past. So I think yes, I think it's likely, but it would take a lot more psychological, but perhaps hypnotic exploration to get
Sure.
anything.
Sure. Well, thanks for sharing that. I'm sure she'll be pleased with the answer. Sandra asked a couple of questions. First, are we tapping into the Akashic field when we rely on our intuition for discernment?
Intuition for discernment. I wonder how exactly she means that.
I would have to interpret, but I believe that she's saying that when we're trying to discern, let's say, for instance, is an experience or a thought that I've had, was that just an imagined thing, construct of my mind and emotions and that part of my being, or was that should I listen to my intuition and say, no, that was a real phenomenon and a direction I should take in my life, for instance? So is that, I guess she's asking, are we tapping, is that intuition and exercise of discernment related to the Akashic field?
I mean, intuition is just a word, and there's no explanation per se, you know. I mean, what is intuition? It's something that happens to, it's something, the German expression calls it falling in. It falls in, it's an Einfall, the Germans say. I mean, that's what intuition is. Einstein said it's more important than rational thinking or intuition. So there it is, you know, I think in intuition, we are tapping into a deeper dimension. And we can't say that it's tapping into Akashic Field, because it's beyond the surface phenomena.
Right.
And if you discern things, if you recognize things, it's because we have encountered them before. It's familiar already. And the Akashic Field is a storehouse, enormous cosmic storehouse of all the things that happened to us and all the things that we have felt. And this helps us to intuit, to discern what there is in our experience today.
Her other question, are our moral compasses and societal paradigms subconsciously drawn from the Akashic Field in addition to being constructs of circumstances? And if so, do our 3 and 4D mechanisms which we have constructed have a higher sustainability the closer they align to Akashic rules? Does that?
I think that's true. I think that's absolutely the case. If our behavior, if our intuitions, if our ideas are sound, they are informed by the Akashic Field. That's one way of putting it, informed by that field. Because we ourselves are evolving entities. We came to life on this planet, in the web of life, and we are evolving, we're interacting, and we're evolving all along. And the way that we evolve, it can be a natural way, or we can be derailed by artificial wants and wishes and desires, and go off in some synthetic way in which we are ultimately harming our world and harming ourselves in the process. So being back to the natural way, connecting to the real source, that I think is the big task before us. There is a better way. There is a good way, and there is a less good ways, and there are bad ways. Evolution shows the good way in nature, in the cosmos. This way is toward coherence, toward the integration of one thing with another, not uniformity, but complexity, which is very different from uniformity, not flatness.
Right.
Just like our body, you know, is a very complex system. It's all its billions of trillions of cells and all the many kinds of different cell systems, but it's all working together. If any part of it doesn't work well, then it's diseased. If any part is detached from the rest and evolves on its own, then it's cancer. You know, I mean, the healthy condition is always working together, cooperating. The many diverse parts form one diverse whole, but integral, coherent whole. That's, I think, the lesson of the new cosmology, the new biology, I think also the new psychology.
Yeah. So we'll wrap up with this then, and kind of hoping to connect then again, kind of the fundamental focus of IFGT and your work. The term that we at the IFGT cite kind of as that kind of fundamental reason for our work is to facilitate our growth collectively and through individuals, therefore collectively, toward this term oft used called the tipping point, where at least my understanding would be that even this kind of conversation might not exist once we pass the tipping point, because it's just would be the common knowledge, such as when we suddenly as humanity accepted that the earth was round, not flat. And so I just was curious about your views of the tipping point and where you might think we are in terms of how close or far to actually reaching that point.
Well, we are reaching tipping points all the time, some bigger, some smaller. With the COVID-19, we reached a very large tipping point. This is a global scope event. which had to be handled in some way. We're still not past it, but perhaps we are on the way. So there are many tipping points in front of us. And these are all way stations to a process, which could be a process, if it's well aligned to the, what I call the tropism, the consistency, the attractor of the natural world. If we are aligned with that, young people call it the force, go with the force, they say in Star Wars. So if you're aligned with that, then we reach a tipping point, we can get past it, we go the right way on. We'll find other tipping points, but they won't threaten us as much. It's not a question anymore than of our survival. It's a question of our evolution more and more. We have to now find the right way forward through these multiple tipping points. It's a great chance we have now is to use this crisis, this global crisis, which showed us that we are all part of the same system. We're all in the same boat, as it were. If we can use that, then the current tipping points can be overcome and will be part of an evolutionary process, a part of an upshift rather than a downshift.
That's so wonderful to end on that perhaps our conception of a single V tipping point is actually this collection, this really evolution of tipping points that we reach along the way, which in my gut reaction to that was that seems much more achievable if it's not one grand thing that we're striving to somehow just jump to the top of the highest mountain, but we climb along the way, and there are various places along the way that are integral to the whole journey.
I think evolution is doable. It's feasible.
Yeah.
Because deep down, we are soundly evolving people who have been derailed by wrong directions in society, partly in technology, but mainly in our worldview. We're thinking of the world as a mechanism, whereas it's a coherent, open, evolving system. If we can recognize that, yes, then we can evolve together with the system. We can go with the force, go with evolution. And that is a big task before us. And I have a hope that the current tipping point, getting past the virus pandemic, it helps us to recognize that we can do this together. We can join together and act as one when it comes really to survival issues, the main issues. We have done this through big wars. We have done this through various crises. We are going to face climate crisis. We are going to face poverty crisis. We are going to face all kinds of immigration crisis and violence coming about. And if we can face it with the knowledge, with the recognition that we are evolving toward coherence, that's the way to go, then I think we can overcome that. And the tipping points will become less crucial, less threatening. Will be more like stepping stones toward a higher form of being.
So encouraging, so poignant, and so encouraging at the same time. And so can't thank you again enough for your continuing conversations with us in the Institute for Global Transformation on Meet the Author. I've enjoyed thoroughly, and thank you again for discussing with us today the book you published last spring, The Immutable Laws of the Akashic Field, Universal Truths for a Better Life and a Better World. You mentioned earlier before we began the recording, you have several more books you're working on and coming out. So I'm hoping we have the opportunity to continue this relationship.
As we speak now, Ken, by the way, I enjoyed our conversation very much. I look forward to setting its course.
Thank you.
I'm putting the finishing touches to a little book where the title says all of it. Very simple title, Upshift Meeting the Challenge.
Oh.
That is a little book that I'm going to come out in a couple of weeks' time. And so I recommend that to your attention and of your Global Transformation Institute as well.
Certainly.
Thank you, Ken, for the discussion. I enjoyed it very much.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening and best of everything to you.
Thank you. Same to you.
Well, I hope we're all back, and I hope you enjoy that. We should have at least 10 or 15 minutes, or as long as people care to ask further questions or just register comments. If you'd like to, you can put them in the chat if they're brief, and we'll try to get to them. If anyone has any comments they'd like to share, please go ahead and speak up or chat up.
Well, Ken, you did a great interview of Dr. Laszlo. I always particularly like that comment as it relates to the randomness of things in the universe by the physicists or the scientists who said it would be, thinking of the universe as randomness would be equivalent to thinking that a tornado could blow through a scrapyard and assemble an airplane. That totally puts it into perspective. Right. So yeah, so thank you for the interview, and I'm gonna read the entire book. So
it really is. It's a compelling read, and if you're not a scientist, especially a physicist, the first third or so that he writes, you have to be paying attention. I really, encourage you to give this some serious attention. Probably the last 2/3 or half of the book are guest authors that really help. And I tried to mention this during the conversation with him, that it really helps take it out of the theoretical and the academic and put it into many different aspects of real life, if you will. One of the chapters is by a physician and a healer who talks about her remote healing capabilities and links those to the Immutable Laws and the Akashic Field discussion preceding it in the book. And it caused me to think about how, and I spent most of my professional career working in academic health centers. And at the beginning of that career, a lot of healing and medical techniques wouldn't have been prescribed in this country, and in part, and probably large part, because they also weren't covered by insurance. And in a not too long period of time, over the past 20, 30 years, we've seen things now that are being regularly prescribed by Western physicians and are covered by insurance, again, because, at least in my opinion, because they found them to be cheaper alternatives and at least as effective. So you think about things like acupuncture and chiropractic and Reiki and massage therapy that are all now very well accepted. Even most, I think, if not many, Western physicians would fully support their patients practicing some form of meditation, recognizing the variety of benefits, whereas you don't have to go back that far in the US history, at least, to find where that would have been looked at as very unusual and probably scoffed at or shunned or worse. So it's a great book to kind of get those ideas. That's kind of where I was trying to get to with it. This stuff doesn't happen by neither by chance nor by us just waiting for everything to evolve. It's a complex, interwoven system of that we act and we affect the Akashic Field, and it also affects us, as I think he mentioned in response to one of Sandra's questions. So neat stuff. We're really very, very fortunate to have crossed paths with Ervin Laszlo, and that he's interested in addressing our group. I have a feeling, as he keeps spitting out half a dozen books a year or whatever it is, that he'll be made available to us again. But I think he's it's like getting to interview one of like an Einstein or something in our time. So it's neat. Did have a comment from Samantha, who had to leave. She said, "This has been wonderful. Thank you for sharing this interview. Conversations like these are fundamental to discovering harmony with our individual, collective, and cosmological experiences. We are all one. I look forward to more. Be well." So yeah, I think she certainly understands the gist. I think most of this audience probably understands that too. And I recently had a long drive and listened to another book by a different author, Robert Lanza, who talks about his theory of biocentrism, and it just beautifully dovetails with so much of what was in Laszlo's book. But if you haven't availed yourself yet to get into a bit of a discussion of quantum theory, I'd highly recommend it. It does tend to twist and blow your mind, but it also is being proven well beyond shadows of any doubt. And there's quite a bit of reference to it in the book that we talked about tonight, but also in many others. And this biocentrism follow-up book from Lanza also does a really nice job of presenting quantum theory to a lay audience. So I'd encourage you to look into that if you have an interest.
Ken, I just wanted to thank you for a great interview and being able to have our members ask questions in advance that you were able to ask Dr. Laszlo, I think was really helpful. And I, again, thank you for a great interview. And Dr. Laszlo is always a great guest.
Thanks, Marianne. Yeah, no, frankly, that is the third time I've heard it now, if you count while I was actually doing the interview, and I pick up something new each time. So I'd encourage those of you interested to listen to it again once it's up on our YouTube channel, and in the interim, go back and listen to the previous interviews that Henry did, because they really are very interesting. And I really enjoyed the first one because Henry spent quite a bit of time just asking Dr. Laszlo about his life and kind of where he came up with the idea of like the Club of Budapest. And it's just interesting to get to know him a little bit more that way. So again, I can't encourage everyone enough to go to the Institute for Global Transformation YouTube channel, and the playlists include a playlist for the Meet the Author book club, and you can go in there and find the past two interviews easily there. So that's that. Thank you, Marianne. All right. Well, I think we've exhausted the discussion, but thank everyone for attending. It's great to see the turnout at these, and I hope you're finding these enjoyable. We will, as Sandra put in the chat, we've got another guest lined up for at least the next 2 months, and I'm working on October now. So hope you're inspired and want to come back and join us the last Wednesday of each month. And until the end of August, then wish you all a good day, evening, whatever time of day it is for you. And thanks again.
Do we have the next author so you can tell everybody what book to get?
The next author is Lissa Friedman. Lissa is a transpersonal psychologist who specializes also in a model called the Enneagram. And she was a teacher of mine as well. And she's recently self-published a book called Boundless, describing her life's experiences. And so I thought it would be nice to occasionally hear from someone who may be considered kind of more just a regular person who has had a significant number of spiritual experiences and has kind of come to understand through those experiences and her life the oneness that we're really kind of all experiencing and learning more and more about. So that's next month. Lissa Friedman.
Thanks, Ken. I have one announcement. Since we have the host for tomorrow's Spiritual Happy Hour on the call. If you haven't joined us on Spiritual Happy Hour on Thursday evening, please do so. We have a fun time, and I hear we have a special program tomorrow. So I'm going to let the host of tomorrow's Spiritual Happy Hour tell us what it's about.
Okay, yes, thank you, Henry. So tomorrow night, we're going to explore the topic of the galactic center. So, so come tomorrow night if you want to hear more about that. And the other thing I'm offering is the reason why this came to my attention is because astrologers are starting to feel that the galactic center in your astrological chart may be just as important as the sun in your chart. So we're going to explore for those who attend we're going to actually explore where that galactic center sits in your charts and talk about what that meaning could be and how that plays out in your life. And so yeah, come tomorrow night and find out more about it.
And bring your chart.
You bring your chart.
Excellent.
Go on up if you know your birthday and time.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, CJ, and thank you, Henry, for making sure that we took advantage of CJ being here to talk about Spiritual Happy Hour, which for anyone not familiar is a weekly program IFGT provides at 8:30 Eastern every Thursday evening. And we now have a rotating group of hosts for that. Please join us for that too. So thank everyone again for coming. Hope you enjoyed it and wish you all peace and safety and happiness and health.